As an educator, I draw three primary lessons. Individualize your teaching as much as possible. Instead of one size fits all, learn as much as you can about each student. Teach each in a way that finds comfortable and learns effectively. I would just want to add to that, within the bounds of reason, right? Let's not be too idealistic about that, but it's a good instinct, right? Secondly, pluralize your teaching. Teach important materials in several ways, not just one. Stories, works of art, diagrams, role play, etc. Right? This way you can reach students who learn in different ways. Third, drop the term styles. It will confuse others and it won't help you or your students. He's against the idea of learning styles. He just wants to talk about these intelligences, which is the way some scholars who love their theories operate. Forget about the rest of that stuff. Do it my way. I figured it out. Woohoo. Well, I'm not so sure about that. This is very valuable stuff, I think. But I think the conversation about style is still important. Okay, so the bottom of 40 is helpful. It ties into a few points about the way that brain research works. And this is a scholar who's been working with the multiple intelligence. Lazier is a guy who's been working with the 8 intelligences and, in a sense, taking them into the classroom. So the more ways a person learns something, the more he really learns it. Okay? The more ways a person learns something, the more will remember it. The more ways someone learns something, the more he and she will understand it. Right? It becomes a part of her being. Okay? So, in what follows is a few pages here that is trying to actually do that. So, look at the example up there at the top. This is what is called here, you're using American parlance, middle school students, which would be grades 6, 7, 8, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, whatever you'd call them here in Singapore, right? Is reviewing the parts of speech. You remember that from English class? You remember how boring that was? Yeah. Do you remember what they all are? No. Okay. There's not going to be a quiz on that, don't worry. The class has been divided into expert groups. Each group is to become an expert in their assigned part of speech, then lead the whole class in a review of their part of speech. First, the expert groups study the definition of their assigned parts of speech in the dictionary and rewrite the definition in their own words. Second, they create a song that explains that what role their part of speech plays in a sentence. Wouldn't that be fun? Try doing that. I'm going like, how would you do that? Third, they demonstrate their this role through physical movements, gestures, role play, posture, facial expressions, physical exercise, etc. Fourth, they create an advertisement for USA Today. USA Today is a rather pathetic American newspaper, worth largely wrapping fish in. It is part of the bane of our existence that communication has been reduced to sound bites, and the soundbite version of a newspaper is USA Today. Anyway. It's only gone worse since USA Today was invented, I know. They create an advertisement for USA Today or the internet to promote their part of speech. Fifth, they present their definitions, song, physical movements, newspaper advertisement to the whole class. They try to convince the class via the newspaper advertisement that their part of speech is the most important. Okay, so I have my own little analysis of what's going on in that for you in the 8 points, but I think you can see what's going on here. This is the argument that purists make, is incorporate as many of these intelligences as possible into everything that you're teaching. Right? So that's a way to try to incorporate lots of other intelligences into something as read-write focused and dry as parts of speech. There's a little bit of a method to the madness of that, right? You might not have thought all of that example was perfect, take it or leave it, but the example is about how would different ways of teaching material look, right, that would accommodate different learning styles, different strengths, bring active engagement into play, and make this practical and hands-on for people to use what they're learning, right? That's what that's all about. So, an idea. Over the page 42, what this really does is another scholar named Armstrong sort of takes those 8 intelligences and turns them into questions you can ask if you're actually designing some sort of learning situation, right? So how would you do that, right? Is there any way to do this? Now, in some topics, it's not very easy to figure out how all of those can be squeezed in. It looks very artificial, looks much too idealistic and theoretical. But I think for most topics, you can think about more than one way to go at something, right? I think there's something to this idea of more than one way. So we all have more than one, right? Back to that theory. And more developed and less than others, and they do clump together a little bit too, right? So one of the interesting things is people with high musical intelligence, which apparently not many people in this classroom were willing to say they had, often goes with this mathematical logical one, right? So how many of you have the strong mathematical logical intelligence? Not many of you either. Or you're just too humble, way too humble. Those often go together, right? No, but that's right. Everybody has more than one, and the idea that it is, I think, valuable in this is you're activating as much of the person as possible to engage the material, right? Activating that person, right? Getting lots of different things going. Right? And some of those are just fun, too. Right? If you had to write a song together as your group, that would probably be pretty hilarious to try to do. Maybe it would just be super stressful and you'd be miserable. I don't know. Right? The example on page 43 is about teaching about fast food. Fast food is one of the evils of our world. At least McDonald's is. And that's just another example.